to the Birth Boot Camp podcast. I'm Holly Hopley, the CEO.
And I'm Liana Wolf, the administrator.
And today we have somebody that has been on the podcast before, a couple of times, I think, actually. So we have Caren Nugent with us. She's one of our instructor trainers and doula trainers, and she's an instructor and a doula and a postpartum doula too. So all the things, and we love Caren. So we're excited to hear your birth stories today as part of our summer of birth stories. We have just a few more. But will you just start by introducing yourself, where you're from, all the fun things about you?
Yeah, so I am Caren Nugent, and I am in Arlington, Texas. So on all social media platforms, I am Arlington Birth Services. Like Holly said, I teach childbirth classes. I'm also one of the Birth Boot Camp trainers, and I do all the things. So, yeah, I'm also a bereavement doula as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Fun. Well, let's just jump right in. Do you want to tell us about your first birth? Let's start with okay, how long ago was your first birth?
He will be 13 on Tuesday. So on August 29th, he'll be 13.
Awesome. You're going to have a teenager.
I know. We've been preparing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fun. I'm almost a year into it. But so tell me about your pregnancy. What were your plans? Where were you planning to have the baby? What did you guys do to prepare? That kind of stuff.
Yeah. So my sister had a baby 3 years before I did. And she was planning a birth center birth with a midwife. And at the time, I knew absolutely nothing. So when she told me that she was planning an out-of-hospital birth, I was like, do you want your baby to die? I just had absolutely no idea about any of it. So when my sister went into labor, she went into labor on my birthday. So we spent the entire day of my birthday at the birth center. And my dad took me out for my birthday lunch or dinner. I'm not bitter. Okay. I'm not bitter. It's only been 16 years. And I didn't see my mom, and we weren't allowed in the birth room, but we were allowed to be at the birth center. And it just took all day long. And I had never heard a woman in labor. I'd never experienced any of this before. And then 42 minutes after my birthday, okay, she had to wait 42 minutes, and then she was born. So we don't even share the birthday. And like I said, I'm not bitter or anything. I just remind her of it every year. She just turned 16. And but I saw how the midwives were so attentive to my sister. There was always a midwife with her. And then there was a midwife that was tending to the midwife. So there was somebody bringing the midwife food, and I you could kind of peek into the door. We would kind of push it open a little bit. They'd come over and close it, but we'd peek in, and there was a midwife that was holding a cup of water for the midwife to drink. So it just seemed like such a beautiful experience. And my sister did very well. So that was kind of my very first experience with out-of-hospital birth. So then whenever my husband and I got married and started talking about having babies, I told them, I want this experience. I have never been in the hospital. I've never had an IV. They kind of freak me out. Needles are scary. And he was a little iffy on it, but I made him watch The Business of Being Born. And that kind of sealed the deal for him. He's like, okay, yep, I'm on board. And he's kind of like that anyway. If this is something you really want to do, then let's do it. My in-laws were very apprehensive of this because, my mother-in-law kind of has that classic, I could have died in labor type of stories. So my sister was pregnant again with my nephew while I was pregnant with my son. So I would go to her appointments with her, and then I would kind of get a feel for what my appointments were going to be like. And I just loved my midwife. She was very knowledgeable. She was very patient. Our appointments with just her were like an hour to an hour and a half. So I really felt very well taken care of. My mother-in-law ended up coming. She was so apprehensive of everything. So she came with me to one of my appointments, and she brought a spiral notebook that had probably 40 questions in there.
my
Oh,
God.
wow.
All about like, this is what happened during my birth. How can this not happen with, this next one? Just like naming off all the things. And my midwife spent time answering every single one of her questions.
Wow.
So after that, my mother-in-law was totally cool. And then we did not take, like, we took the birth center childbirth class, and I read the Bradley book, but that was really it. That was all the education that I had. And I felt super prepared. I mean, I knew all about birth, right? I watched The Business of Being Born. I watched my sister labor from behind the door. I felt super prepared. Yeah, I wasn't. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't know what I was supposed to be feeling. But that's how, and then I was planning to have the baby at the birth center, because my thought was, I don't want to have to clean up anything at my house. And so the midwife was like, okay, let's do it here at the birth center. And so that's what we had planned.
Awesome. I love hearing, like, especially as a first time mom, as somebody who chooses an out of hospital birth, because it's just, I actually do think it's becoming more common now because more people are hearing about out of hospital births, but it's usually like, oh, I'll do my first one at the hospital and then I'll have my other ones out of hospital. So I just love hearing those types of things. That's exciting.
Yeah, mine was fear for needles. I didn't want an IV. The epidural, the idea of that freaked me out. So that was really what drove that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's wild. And I mean, I grew up my mom's a nurse, and so it never fazed me, the idea of going to a hospital. And so I was the same as you. It was like, why on earth would I deliver at home? Like, because I had no idea that a midwife, does everything that an OB does except for surgery. I was clueless. And I didn't even know about the business of being born until after I had the first one.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. I didn't learn about it till after either. That's funny.
So yeah, it's pretty impressive that you just like went for it. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
So who did you have on your birth team? You had your midwife, obviously. You had your husband. Did you have a doula? Did you like?
I
Yeah.
didn't. That wasn't really super popular at the time. And what I know now about my midwife and the way that they kind of did everything, they were very hands-on. She's a CPM, so she's very hands-on. Like I said, whenever my sister was in labor, she never left my sister's side. She was very supportive. But at my sister's birth, my mom was in the room and my sister's mother-in-law was in the room with her. And then in the waiting room was like me and my dad and my sister's father-in-law and like her brothers-in-law, like everybody was there. So I didn't want that. I didn't want everybody there. So at the birth center, it was just me and my husband and my midwife, and then she had a student that came. So it was very small.
Mm-hmm.
Oh. So how did it go?
It went very well. So I just never know what questions y'all are going to ask. So I didn't want to like jump ahead. So my husband and I went out on a date. And this was about 12 days before our due date. And so we did like half the day was my date, half the day was his date. My date included lunch and a movie and then walking around a bookstore. My husband's half of the day included ponchos, which if you've never had ponchos, it's like Mexican TV dinner, but not as good. It's disgusting. And then we had sex because of course.
That's what you
So I
do.
wake up. I mean, that's what you have to do, right? So I wake up at like 2 a.m. and I'm feeling kind of crampy. And I go to the bathroom. And whenever I wipe, I have like what looks like my vagina just hawked a loogie. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. So I called my sister. My sister worked nights as a nurse at the time. And so I called her and I was like, so I'm feeling some cramps and I have this big snot ball that just came out of my vagina and I don't know what that means. And she's like, well, it sounds like you might be in labor. And then she's like, call Lisa, call her and tell her what's going on. So I call her, she's asleep. And I feel so bad. Like, when you call somebody at 3 o'clock in the morning, they're just like, hello, but she's like, that's fine. Just, start timing them, see where it goes. So I'm able to go back to sleep, but they do start picking up in intensity. And this was on a Sunday morning. And we had planned on going to church. And I'm laying on the couch and I'm like kind of moaning. And my husband's like, we can't go to church with you moaning like that. I don't think that would be appropriate. And I was like, oh man, but I really want to go. Okay, fine. And then we decide to go to the birth center instead. So we get to the birth center and she did check me, but I don't remember like what it was at the time. But she said that I could hang out at the birth center. And so I immediately go upstairs and I go get in the bed because that's what I have seen on all the movies and all the TV shows of birth was you lay in the bed. And so I'm sitting there and this was back before smartphones were really a thing. And I'm just like, I'm bored. And she's like, well, you don't have to stay here. I was like, oh, I can get up. I had no idea. So we went downstairs and she had like old VHS tapes. And so we watched Father of the Bride. And my husband had never seen Father of the Bride. So it's on the TV and we're laying on the couch and I have my feet in his lap. And he is so focused on the movie because he had never seen it. So he's just like, you're doing good, honey. You're doing good. And he'd like pat me on the leg and like, good job, good job. And then all of a sudden I get very nauseous and I'm like, I'm going to throw up. And I tell my husband like, honey, I'm going to throw up. And I yell for my midwife, Lisa, I'm going to throw up. And I just kind of sit up and I start throwing up. My husband reaches out his hands. And so I'm throwing up in his hands and I have a fear of throwing up. Like it is my worst fear ever. Stomach stuff, I just can't. So I'm throwing up and then Lisa comes over with this bowl and my husband kind of like shakes out his hands and he holds the bowl and I continue to throw up. And then I'm like, this isn't fun anymore. I don't want to be down here. I don't want to watch this movie. I just want to go back upstairs. So we turn off the movie. He still has never seen the end of Father of the Bride.
Oh,
So we
that
go
is so funny.
upstairs. And they're like, okay, why don't you try different positions? And so they put the birth ball on the bed and then they're telling me to get on my hands and knees. So I get on my hands and knees and I have this really awful contraction. I mean, it is just horrible. And I throw the ball across the room and I said, I don't like that position. I want to get in the tub. And they're like, okay, well, we can go ahead and do that. So they're so kind and I'm just not being kind. And so we start walking to the bathroom and I feel like I need to push. And I'm like, I need to push. And they're like, okay, push. Well, in my mind, I'm thinking if I push, this baby's going to just fall out because that's what you see in the movies. One push and baby's here. And so I push and I'm kind of nervous and I'm like, no, you're fine. It's okay. I promise. So we get into the tub, and I left my phone in the bedroom, and we had been updating like family members and our church friends of everything that was going on. Well, I forgot to put my phone on silence. So I'm sitting in the tub, and we have no music or anything. It's just real quiet. And we could just hear the phone going off in the other room. And I'm like, that is the most annoying sound I have ever heard in my entire life. And then I start pushing, and it's about like I was able to go back through my records, and it was about 45 minutes that I pushed. And we did not know what we were having. We did not know if we were having a boy or a girl. So my husband caught the baby, and he just kind of threw it on my chest because he was so freaked out. So I'm holding the baby, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this. And then I'm like, what is it? And so the midwife's like, I don't know. Why don't you look? And so Ryan like lifts up the leg very tenderly, and just like, oh, it's a boy. And, so then we start kind of like, yay. And then I think we delivered the placenta in the tub. I can't remember. I honestly don't, my placenta probably never even came out. I don't even know. It's still in there, I'm sure. So we end up going to the bed, and we're doing the skin to skin, and I'm trying to latch him on, and it is just really, really painful, and he's not latching on. And I already have very, very sensitive nipples. So I'm just assuming that this is going to suck. This is going to be the worst thing ever. And the midwife is like, okay, well, I can't let you go home until he at least latches. And he did latch for a couple of minutes, maybe a couple of minutes. And that was kind of good enough for them. And then 4 hours later, we were home. I did take a shower at the birth center because I don't like to be sweaty, and my hair was real sweaty, and I felt really gross. And so I'm like, can I take a shower? And the midwife's like, I guess so. They didn't have any shampoo. They didn't have anything. I'm like, what kind of shower is this? But I just felt so gross. Then we get home, and so it all started at like, I don't know, 2, 3 in the morning. And then he was born at 5. So not very long, like 5 p.m. So
that's not bad.
Yeah.
And then we got home around 9, I think. And this was my parents' 3rd grandkid. My nephew had already been born a couple of weeks before. So this was already my parents' 3rd grandkid, but it was my in-laws' first. So they're like, how about the Nugents come over tonight, and we will come over in the morning. So we're at home, my in-laws come over, and I'm wearing my super sexy Depends, and I'm changing Aaron on the changing table. And then it hits me, because my sister had told me about the very first postpartum poo. And she's like, you want to take stool softeners. So I think I did. Take stool softeners. So as I'm changing Aaron, it hits me. And I start kind of freaking out. And you just had a baby 4 or 5 hours earlier. Your muscles are just like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I called my husband, and I just go in my diaper. So I am changing my son's diaper, and I am going in mine, and I just start crying, because how embarrassing is that? And my in-laws are in the next room, and my son is on the changing table. And so my husband says, go to the bathroom. So I go to the bathroom, and he comes in there, and I'm like, what did you do with the baby? He's like, he's fine. He's not going to roll over. I was like, he will. Go and get him. And so my in-laws take my son, and my husband is so sweet, and he gets like a trash bag, and he's like changing my diaper. He walks me to our shower. He like washes me up. I mean, it was so sweet. And I am just crying my eyes out. I am so embarrassed. And I mean, this has been 13 years, and I still remember that feeling of having major bathroom issues in my diaper. So it took me a while to have ponchos, because that's what happened after eating ponchos.
Oh
So
man.
I
And
don't do that.
say we hit full circle there.
Yes. Uh, and so, anyway, everything ended up being fine, but it was just, I had no tearing. But my son never did latch, and he never did go back to sleep. Like we talk about, like after the first hour, babies tend to have a crash. Mine never did. And the next day he had been up for probably 18 hours after his birth.
Wow.
And he was not latching. It was very, very, very painful. He was crying. I was crying. My husband was crying. We were all just crying. And I'm talking to my midwife, and she said, I was telling her, like, he's not sleeping. He's not going to sleep at all. What do I do? And she's like, well, have you tried turning him over and having him sleep on his stomach? It's like, no, because he will die. And she's like, he won't die. It's okay. So we did. We put him on his stomach and he slept for 8 hours. But we had breastfeeding issues for the entirety of everything. So what we now know was a tongue tie, and then he needed cranial sacral therapy because he had a jam in the back of his skull that was preventing him from laying on his back. Anytime we put him on his back, he would scream bloody murder. So he always had to be on his stomach. So that's always been fun.
Wow.
Wow. Yep. I love how you tell stories. Like I love how you shared that story.
Well, thank you. Despite I really did love my births. Like they really were good days. I mean, they were fun. And I know that's weird, but I really enjoy giving birth.
If I didn't have to be pregnant again, I would totally have another one. I'll just labor. I just don't want to be pregnant again.
I didn't have to breastfeed or raise another kid. I could do that.
That's why I did surrogacy twice. I was like, I'll have a baby. I just don't want to raise one.
Right?
I don't even mind the raising part. It's I don't want to ever be pregnant again because I have difficult pregnancies. So
yeah,
like I'll labor all day. I don't mind the breastfeeding, even though it sucks the first like 6 to 8 weeks.
I hated breastfeeding from day one with my daughter. I had built it up and put it on such a pedestal. And then whenever I was able to breastfeed her, I was like, okay, this is going to be amazing. And it wasn't, it sucked. And I hated it, but I breastfed her for over 2 years. And I just hated every minute of it.
I mean, but I think it's okay for people to hear that, like, and to hear that it's not all like rainbows and butterflies, like, because we see all these like beautiful images. And there are a lot of moms who feel that way. They do it because they feel like that's what's best for their baby, and they want to provide their baby with breast milk, but they don't necessarily love it. Like, yeah. I've talked to multiple women who feel that way now, and I think it's important for people to hear that.
Yeah.
So,
and like the only reason why breastfeeding Sarah was so different was because I knew I had gone to all of the specialists. We had done the tongue tie revision. We had seen lactation consultants. We had seen chiropractors. So that was but because I was an exclusive pumper with Caren, I exclusively pumped for over 13 months.
Wow.
And that's through staph infections in my nipples, both nipples, from about the time he was 4 to 5 months old. I had staph infection in both of my nipples the entire time. As soon as I was done pumping, we were done. So I told my husband, we're going to do the tongue tie. We're going to do the chiropractor. We're going to do all of the things. If that doesn't work and I still cannot produce milk, or she is not latching, I'm not doing it. My mental health cannot handle it. Yeah. And what I know now about postpartum, I know I had postpartum depression, and I had it pretty severely with my son. And I know a lot of that stemmed from the pressure of needing to breastfeed. So
Yep.
I can tell others about it.
Yep.
Yeah, what we do. So
Yeah.
without going into all the details of Sarah's birth, what did you want to do differently?
Oof. We had her at home this time. My midwife said that I was a great candidate for home births. I had very easy labors and they were short. So she's like, I think you will be a very good candidate for a home birth. So as soon as we found out we were pregnant with her, we got a new bathtub. And so we demolished our old one and we got a really big, great, like
I
2-person
love
tub.
it. I love it. That's like when I look at
So
houses, I totally like look at the tubs. Even though I'm like, I'm done having babies, I'm always like, that's a great tub to give birth in.
great birth tub. Yep.
Yep.
But honestly, like there really wasn't a whole lot that I would have changed about the birth itself. Mine more came from postpartum. So I knew that I wanted a lactation consultant to come out right away. Like that was so important to me. And then we assumed that she would be tongue tied. We found out my husband is tongue tied, my brother-in-law is tongue tied, and my mother-in-law is tongue tied. So and I think my father-in-law is too. So we knew that this was a big possibility. So that was what was going to change was we were going to make the investment early on to get everything taken care of. And I refused to pump. I had spent over 1,100 hours on my pump with Caren, and I wasn't going to do it this time. So mine wasn't really the birth. It was postpartum.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we still didn't want a lot of people there. I still didn't want my mom or my mother-in-law or anybody there. Like we still wanted it to just be us. And so nothing about the birth really changed, just the location.
Mm-hmm. Same midwife?
It was the same midwife, but her grandmother died like a couple of days before my daughter was born. So she was out of state. So I had her backup and she ended up being just as amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's awesome.
So I tell my students this because I think it's important. We didn't know what we were having with our second one either. So whenever I go into labor, we have a toddler, like Caren's not even 2 yet. And my mom and my grandmother come over to pick up Caren so that I can continue laboring. And so my mom knew I was in labor. And my dad knew that my mom had picked up my son. So after Sarah was born, my dad had called, which is kind of a funny story, but my dad had called my husband. And so my husband told him like, hey, Sarah is born. And he's like, oh, okay, great. We assumed my dad was going to tell my mom. My dad did not tell my mom. So my mom found out that I had a baby and that it was a girl on Facebook because I assumed that my parents were together and they were not. So I tell people, call your mom. Make sure she knows. Don't assume it's going to get to her.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, that's always fun.
Yep.
Wow.
So tell us, kind of give us some more details what happened with Sarah's birth.
So the whole getting pregnant with her was very funny. I mean, that was fun. But like before I even took a test, my dad said, when are you going to tell us that you're pregnant? And I was like, what are you talking about? And my dad never says anything like that. That's weird. And so I told my husband, like, this is what my dad said to me today. That's very weird. We weren't even really trying or anything. So it was so weird. And so out of the blue, I went to the store that day, bought a test, and it was positive. I hadn't even skipped a period yet.
Wow.
So I was like, how did my dad know this? And so we told my dad, he's like, oh, okay. Well, now you're going to tell me, like, how long have you been keeping this? I was like, what you told me? So the entire pregnancy was great. I saw a chiropractor. I knew I was going to have the lactation consultant come out. So I go into labor at about 7 a.m. and I call my sister because I don't know why. I don't know why I called her. It was just like, yeah, I'm feeling kind of crampy. And my husband's in there like brushing his teeth. And right whenever he heard me say that, he spit it out. He's like, crampy? I'm not going to work. And so he immediately starts going into nesting mode and he starts cleaning the house. I have this IKEA chair that I had bought right before. And so he's putting that together. He's cleaning everything. He's making me egg sandwiches. And I'm just like trying to pretend like labor's not there because I have a 2-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting him ready to go. And then things start kind of picking up. And I would like kind of stop on the table and just kind of rock. And he hated that. Like that would freak him out. My son has kind of some sensory stuff that was starting to develop around that time. So he just did not like me being in labor. He didn't like me stopping at all. So I called my mom and I was like, hey, can you come and get Aaron? Labor is starting. The midwives are on their way over. So we take this family picture of us and then he leaves and it's probably about 12 o'clock. Maybe I think it was around 12 o'clock. He leaves and the midwives are there and I'm laying on the couch and we are watching Man versus Food. Do y'all remember that on Netflix? And the midwives are like, this is an interesting choice for labor. And then I have a really big contraction and I start getting that nausea feeling. And I had learned from the first one. So I had a throw up bowl already ready. And during Aaron's birth, Ryan was kneeling next to the tub and he was just like, my knees hurt. And the midwives are just like, nobody cares. So I I had this really bad contraction, which, obviously is transition, right? And I start feeling the nausea and I want to go into the bathtub. And so I tell them I want to go to the bathtub. So we're going to the bathtub and I look at my husband. I said, don't forget your pillow. He's like, oh yeah, thanks. So he literally grabs the pillow to kneel next to the tub. And I get in the tub and I immediately start pushing. And then 9 minutes later, Sarah's born.
Wow.
And because he's a pro now, right? He's a pro. He knows how to deliver a baby now. So he gets Sarah. And because we didn't know what we were having, he's like flipping her upside down to see what she is. And then it's like, oh, it's Sarah. And then he gently puts her on my chest instead of like throwing her there. And then not even 5 minutes later, I hadn't even gotten out of the tub. I don't even think, like I said, I think my placenta is still in there. I never remember delivering my placenta. So my placenta is still inside of me and I'm still in the tub and my dad calls my husband. And my dad doesn't work on Fridays. And so he would call my husband usually around 1 o'clock in the afternoon to invite my husband to go fishing with him on Fridays as kind of a joke, like, haha, you're working and I'm not. So my dad calls Ryan and asks him if he wants to go fishing. And Ryan's just like, we just Sarah was literally just born. And my dad's like, cool. Well, I guess we won't go fishing then. Hangs up. And so Ryan's like, that was really weird. Like, how did he know? How did he know that I was pregnant? How did he know she was born? I don't know. It was weird. And then she latched on in the tub and I just started crying because that was my biggest fear during pregnancy, was that I was not going to be able to nurse this baby. It did hurt, but she had latched on. It didn't hurt as bad as with Aaron. So she was born on Friday the 13th. So Friday the 13th is a great day. Love that day. And then the lactation consultant came out on Sunday, and then her tongue tie was corrected on Tuesday. And we had no issues for over 2 years. It was the best breastfeeding relationship ever. I just hated it. And I think the only reason why I might have had postpartum depression with her is because at the time we were doing a bunch of autistic testing with my son, and he was getting up and to be 2 years old. It was just a very hard time. So
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that it was hard parenting a 2-year-old and how much of it was postpartum. So I don't know. I just know that like Sarah would cry. I'd put her on the boob and she was fine. I was like, well, that was easy. So she didn't cry as much as Aaron did.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
What made you, especially with your first, what made you guys not want to find out the gender?
So my sister didn't find out. You know, I always looked up to my big sister, right? So she didn't find out, and then it started to become like a thing. Like it almost pissed people off that we didn't find out. At the time, that wasn't really a thing. This was right whenever finding out the gender was like a big deal. Gender reveal parties were kind of starting to come around. But it just started to piss people off a little bit more. And my favorite color is pink. I love pink. So if I had known we were going to have a girl, oh my gosh, my house would have been thrown up in pink. So, and then if we had had a boy the next time, then we would have had to get all new things. So it kind of forced us to rein it in a little bit. And we were able to use everything because both of my kids were born in the summer. Sarah was born in July, Aaron was born in August. So we were able to use so many of their clothes, and we got practical gifts at their baby showers. We didn't get any, you know, we got clothes and we got blankets, but they were gender neutral and those aren't as cute. So people were it gave us more practical things.
That's funny.
I love that. We didn't find out with any of ours either. And it was the same thing. It was like, nope, we don't know. How can you do a baby's a baby?
Right. Like how much preparation do you need for a baby? Like it's the same stuff. Just get yellow or green.
So like basically newborn to 3-month clothes were all gender neutral.
Yep.
Yeah. And it was great because we used them for all of them.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to get all new things. And I know a couple of people who they thought they were having a girl and then they had a boy or the opposite. And so like, then you're spending even more money because now you got to go and replace everything. Like, no, that's stupid. Just don't find out.
What my mom did with our very first, because we didn't know, and he was due before Thanksgiving, but we made it past Thanksgiving, and so she went to a Black Friday sale at Carter's, the baby store. Like Black Friday sale. So she got 2 ginormous bags, one full of girl stuff and one full of boy stuff. And so she was just like, I'll return whichever one we don't need.
Yeah.
That's funny.
That's a great idea.
She was so excited that she was able to do that because it was Black Friday and they have like good sales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I totally agree with waiting, but a lot of other people don't.
No,
we did it once. We did it once because we had a boy and then we had a girl. And then for our third, I was like, well, we have everything we need. So
yeah.
But then with our fourth, we did because everybody wanted our fourth to be a girl. And everybody was like, it's a girl, it's a girl, it's a girl. And it wasn't. And so I didn't, my daughter really wanted a sister. And like, I was like, I don't really want the birth to be when she finds out if it's not a girl, like that disappointment. And when she did find out, she was disappointed.
Yeah.
She still asked me to this day for a sister. And I'm like,
no.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So
go make a new friend and she can be your sister.
Yeah.
Yeah. She has lots of friends with like dance and stuff. So awesome.
My husband just told me the other day that if he could have been guaranteed that a fourth would be another girl, that he would have been on board with a fourth kid of our own.
Oh,
I was like, say what now?
I mean, that's what I tell my daughter. if somebody could guarantee that we were going to have a girl and that she wouldn't be tongue-tied, and she would sleep a little bit better than her younger brother, I would totally have another one. But nobody can guarantee me those things. So, yep.
People will often ask, like, when do babies start sleeping through the night? I'm like, well, mine's 13 and we still haven't gotten there yet. So I don't know.
Yep, that's what I tell them. I'm like, well, my 4, almost 5-year-old still does it. So
Yeah.
My almost 10-year-old, he'll be 10 on Monday. He sleepwalks.
oh,
So he often gets up once, as far as we know.
mm-hmm.
He'll come down to the living room, and if we're up, and we can tell if he's actually awake
Yeah.
or not. And we've
Mhm.
learned, okay, we just get up and okay, let's go back to bed, and we walk him back up and we tuck him in, and then we're done.
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
it's wild.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sleep,
Parenting
man.
is, yep. Parenting, sleep, all that kind of stuff. Yep.
It's a
So
whole
Yeah.
different ball game.
awesome. Well, this was so fun to hear more details about your births. I knew a little bit about both of them, but it's kind of fun to hear more details from you. So
I had fun births. Like, I enjoyed them. I liked my care provider. My husband's hilarious. Like, I mean, if I could have births like that all the time, let's do it.
Yep. Yeah, you have like the kind of like the textbook, like best case scenario. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I think with Aaron, my labor was like 13 hours. And then with Sarah, it was like 6. So, I mean, it was very textbook and, no complications and no
Yep.
tearing. So,
Yeah, that's awesome.
and my
And then
midwife
you became a birth worker.
exactly. My midwife used to say, I wish all of my clients would have office hour births.
Yeah.
I was like, well,
It was like mine. I have daytime babies.
Yeah.
Like 4 of the 5 that I delivered were dinner time.
Wow.
They were born at dinner time. And I was like, sweet, give me some food.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I have a dinner and a lunch. So
that's awesome. All right. Well, thanks for spending some time with us this morning. It's always fun to chat with you.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell people where they can find you real quick in case they want to follow you or learn more from you?
Absolutely. On Instagram and TikTok, I am Arlington Birth Services. My TikTok, I am kind of trying something fun and different where I am learning how to do makeup while also telling birth stories from clients or from students or friends, and just telling fun birth stories. So
That'll be fun.
I'm learning how to do that. So that, and then arlingtonbirthservices.com is my website.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody. Stay tuned a couple more weeks. We've got a few more birth stories for you to get us through the rest of the summer. And be sure that you subscribe and stay tuned to next